Welcome to Podcast Done For You, the show where we make it as easy as possible for you to make the right choices to advance your podcasting career. So let's get started on the show. So you want your podcast to have a great audience, to really be able to build that to watch your podcast grow. Well, you've come to the right place. Podcast Done For You, the show. That's what we're going to tackle in this particular episode. So hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of, as I said, Podcast Done For You, the show. Now, the question on everyone's lips is really about how you grow your audience. And there are many things to think about, but I want to start with the basics. That's what I really want to address in this particular episode. You really have to understand your audience in the first instance. Have you taken the time to understand who they are? It's a typical marketing branding question that goes beyond the podcast itself. Who is it that is in the core audience of your business? Who is it that you want to target specifically as well? Because there are different targets, as you know, within your business of who you might want to reach. So the question in the first instances is really in your business sense, but before you even get into the podcast, is have you taken the time to understand your audience? Now, there's a lot of exercises that you can do around persona building or avatar building, as people like to call it these days. Either way, it's the same thing. Now, I see a lot of formulas around about how you go about doing this, and there's no absolute right or wrong. But what I like to do is to take some time to really think about the different individuals in the audience to understand a little bit about who they are. One of the tricks I like to have is to give them a name, because if you give someone a name from the beginning, it becomes much easier to refer to them. It's very difficult to refer to persona or avatar 1, 2, 3. Much easier to think of, well, that was Sarah, that was John. And the reason for doing that is when you start building messages or you start developing your podcast, you want to think about those particular people sitting there in your audience, listening into you. Is the conversation that you are having going to be one that will resonate with them? And it is, again, much easier to think of them as an individual. And therefore, as an individual, understand as much about them as possible on things that may or may not impact on what you will say and how you might treat them. Different core values that will come across, different understanding of where they sit. There's a big difference, obviously, between talking to, for example, teenagers to talking to grandparents. That's an obvious differentiator. But what is it within the context of your business? Have you gone through that exercise to understand who is the core audience for your business? And now, if you're planning the podcast, who is the core audience for that? Because they may not necessarily be one and the same thing. Sometimes you have a podcast that is targeting a different level of people in other businesses, for example, or a different clientele to try and get more traction and either push down or push up, depending on who you're trying to target in that business. What I mean by that? Well, for example, you might do business with a particular middle level management of a business, for example, but if the podcast wants to help you get some traction within that business, perhaps you need to have a conversation with the CEO. Now, getting in the front door with that CEO may be extremely difficult for you. So what better way to do it than to have a conversation with them through a podcast? So you can let them know that they can listen in their own time and that your messages can deliver across and equally can be pushed down. It's also the same also applies where you might be working the other way, where the ultimate decision maker actually is the CEO, but you need to drive more information and build more credibility with people at a lower level of management before you can get to that conversation. So there's just a couple of examples of how there might be a variation in who it is you're talking to. So it's really important to understand, again, who your audience is and everything about them, and then understand who the target is for your, firstly for your business and then for your podcast. Now, when you're trying to understand the individuals that you're aiming at, as I was saying before, get as much information as you can put down on a piece of paper or in a document of some description and repeat it for the amount of different audience types that you really want to focus on. Now, it's it is important to understand, as I using that example before of teenagers versus grandparents, because there are different ways that you might speak as a result. There are different things that you might reference as a result. There's no point talking to teenagers about what it's like to have children. Now, you can, of course, talk to grandparents and parents about what it's like to have children for obvious reasons. So it is really trying to understand where they're pitched and the differentiators that you've got. And it's really important to take it to the next level. So you want to understand what it is that is going to offer value to them. Why would they listen? What is it that they actually want to get from you? Are there offers? And I don't mean, hey, it doesn't always have to be about download this or you're going to get these 5 tips out of it. It's what's information is going to really resonate with them that is going to add value to what they're doing. You don't want to be telling them something that they already know, and you do want to be having a conversation in a way that resonates with them. I see a lot of podcasts out there where they really talk at you. I'm not trying to talk at you. I'm trying to have a conversation with you. Now, that may suit in certain audiences, but it certainly doesn't suit my audience. I'm trying to have a conversation with you because I want to help you. I'm not trying to tell you this is what you must do. These are suggestions, and this is us engaging with one another to try and help you get ahead with your podcast. Now, of course, I'm going to preface all of that with something that I want to take a break and say to you is that this is stuff that I do work with all my clients with very directly, and I have specific exercises and things that we go through together. Now, we do that as part of Podcast Done For You because we make the podcast happen very easily. So all you have to do is show up and be the expert on the program. We even host the show for many of our clients. More information on that, of course, in the comments below and in the show notes, I should say. So let's put that aside. Let's go back to the audience that we're trying to build. Now, one of the things that you want to think about beyond the basic topics that they want to hear about is really delving a little bit further into what they want and need. Now, if you understand the definition of wants and needs, that's great, but many of you don't, so I'm going to give it to you very simply. The difference between wants and needs is this. I need a car to get me from A to B, but I want the Ferrari. And that's the difference. It's as simple as that. The needs are something that people expect and are standard and are in many respects not all that emotive. What they want is the emotive stuff. In the reality, to get from A to B, you could have any car. So long as it works, any car would do. But what you really want is the luxury, the sports car, the sunroof, the expensive wheels, etc., etc. All of those things that become emotional drivers. And it's a really important thing to think about with your podcast. What are the emotional drivers that are going to entice listeners in to listen in the first place? And secondly, like you're going to do right now, and hit the subscribe button so that you keep coming back. So it is really important that you understand the wants and needs of each of your audience members. Now, the other thing that I like to ask my clients to go through and work with them together on is the whole idea of problems and solutions, because everybody has a series of problems that they're looking to resolve. And what you want to do is find the solutions. Now, the solutions may involve you bringing guests onto the program, or you may have all of the solutions with you. But what this is going to do, all of this, is provide some insight into what the audience is after, how you're going to offer some value to them. Don't just launch into the podcast and hope that they're going to be there and be interested in the same things that you are, because more often than not, you're not the core of who your audience is going to be. And as much as you want to go and check with family and friends, and sometimes even colleagues, if they're only wearing their proverbial hat as themselves and not taking into consideration what the audience wants, then their thoughts and feedback may not be all that valuable. it's really important that you do have that audience nailed. And it's a good idea if you do, in the process of working out those personas, there might be a real equivalent of a John or Sarah or whoever it is that you can actually send the podcast to in the first instance and say, hey, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? What things would you like us to talk about in future episodes? Because that's certainly something that you want to encourage, is that you want feedback so you delve into things in future episodes. The reason that I'm recording this episode today is because I've had a number of people asking me about these fundamentals of getting the audience right. So hence the reason we've got the episode all about your audience and getting it right. So these are the critical things to think about. Then it comes into something that we will delve into in further detail in another episode, is making sure that you get the title of the episode right, the individual episodes, but also making sure that you get the name of the podcast overall right. It's good fun to be quirky sometimes, but is that going to resonate with your audience? Are they going to understand it? Too often people get too close to their own subject matter, again, losing contact with the audience itself. And so what you think is a good idea, the audience may have no real idea what it's about. So make sure that it is going to resonate. One of the things to avoid is the horrible use of acronyms. People forget that acronyms don't always have the same meaning to everybody. And I was just with someone recently and they used 3 particular letters. I won't go into which because it's not all that important, that I commonly associate with something all the time. And yet they referred to it as something completely unrelated and different. It's a very easy trap to fall into. Avoid acronyms at all cost if you can, unless they are so well known in the audience space that you're in that it's not in question. Again, goes back to making sure you understand your audience so that you can get the title right. Now, when it comes to the titles of your individual episodes, knowing your audience will also be super critical, because there is a difference, again, as I was saying, to having a conversation with them and talking to people or instructing people. What does your audience want? What are they in this for? If if you feel as though the audience wants to be talked to, great. It's not who my audience is. And I hope you appreciate that listening into this or watching this, if you are on YouTube at the moment, because it's really about engaging together. And that's what I think is the key to an audience. It is a conversation with them. You want your audience to be sitting there and saying, yes, that's me who they're talking to, or it's me who they're talking about. And if that is the case, then they're going to want to come back for more. And all of the other things that you're going to want to do to grow your audience, to publish it on social media, to send out newsletters, email blasts, to talk about it in forums and discussion groups and with partners and anywhere else, all of those things fall into place very easily if in the first instance you know who your audience is and you're having a conversation with them right from the outset. So I hope that has provided a little bit of information for you on getting you started and underway. Now, what I will say is that if you would like some more information about how to get personas right, then hit me up. There's plenty of ways to contact me through the notes. I'm not going to put a document blindly that you can download into the show notes. And the reason I don't do that is because, very simply, it's about working together on this. I could provide something, but it's not the same as having an actual real one-on-one conversation and making it happen. I'd love to do that with you. We even do workshops where we'll just work on that for you we can do 1 or 2 other things if you like to throw into the mix to help you get your podcast started. So whether you want us to do the whole show and everything from beginning to end in it, or you just want to do some pre-work with it, reach out and let us know. And if in the end, all you really want is just a simple download, then hit me up. We'll see what we can do about that. But right now, I'd like to just remind you again, Podcast Done For You is here to help you. We welcome your feedback. We welcome your comments. Please feel free to leave them in wherever you are listening to this. We hope that you're watching, particularly on YouTube, in which case, definitely on all of the platforms, do hit subscribe. And we'd love to hear your feedback about what other topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, because you are the audience we are doing this for. So thank you so much for listening in or watching if you are on YouTube, as I said, and we'll see you next time on the Podcast Done For You show.